Hey everybody, it's time for another pro wrestling series review. This is my WCW from 1998 through 2001 pay-per-view series review. This is a remade version. There was one from earlier this year of a incomplete WCW Bash at the Beach 2000 review. The reason I decided to do this because at the time when I did the first one, I couldn't find all of the WCW 2000 pay-per-views because the website I went to watch them on, all of the pay-per-views were removed. Then I managed to find a new website that has a lot of classic uploaded pay-per-views from various companies like WCW, ECW, and Classic Impact Wrestling. So I decided to retitle. I'll finish that other Bash at the Beach one, but this is the brand new intro to the brand new series I'm going to be doing. I'm going to be doing webcam and narration picture versions. So yeah, both the links to the previous and past versions will be in the description box below. Some of my favorites will have multiple reviews, one with every match on it, and some with some of my favorite and best matches from the card. So, with that being said, let's get started right now. Let's go back in time to when wrestling was great.
There's nothing to
the second part of my remade WCW in 2000 pay-per-view review series. This time, the last video we did the NWO 2000 era. This time, this video focuses on the very big, the much larger Millionaires Club versus New Blood feud. This was the whole Vince Russo and Eric Bischoff returning to television and relaunching WCW. Both Vince Russo and Eric Bischoff, after being fired and sent home several months ago, both made their returns to television and in storyline joined forces to form a brand new heel faction group to call the New Blood, which featured anyone 39, 38 and younger. They feuded with the Millionaires Club. Anyone 40 and up, 40 and up was the Millionaires Club, who were the baby faces. In real life, the idea was, one of the main reasons WWE was able to regain the advantage over WCW in the Monday Night Wars was because they focused on, instead of relying on wrestlers from the past, they focused on and put over established new stars like Stone Cold Steve Austin, The Rock, Triple H, Mick Foley, and so many more. So WCW tried that here, and I've said it once, I've said it 1,000 times. This, in my opinion, was one of my all-time favorite angles, and I think it's one of the best and most underrated. If WCW had did this 1 or 2 years before, WCW, in my opinion, would still be in business today. One of the biggest issues WCW had was letting wrestlers like Hogan, Hall, Nash, and various other top guys run, awarding these guys big money contracts and letting these guys do what they want. So happy that today's wrestling, you don't have people like that in wrestling. You don't have people like that in wrestling anymore. But that's one of the biggest reasons WCW. But that's for another video. This is right here, the review series. So yeah, but I love this storyline. While the NWO 2000 stuff before this was much more exciting, this storyline was much better. This is the second best of the WCW 2000 era, with the next video series, the next two, which will focus on late 2000 and early 2001, were the best. This was second best. Lots of great feuds here and lots of big things. However, the biggest and greatest thing here was the main event rise of Booker T. The main event rise of Booker T and Jeff Jarrett too. A lot of people like to think when WCW brought in Jeff Jarrett, he was immediately in the main event. No, he was in the mid card. He was in the mid card. He didn't become the main eventer until 2000, and he didn't win the title until the very first pay-per-view, until the Spring Stampede 2000 pay-per-view, which I'm about to talk about in a moment. But yeah, the main event rise of Booker T, Jarrett, and later Steiner, which they should have did 1 year earlier. A veteran should have put these guys and Benoit, Malenko, Guerrero, and Jericho in them when they were still, Jericho and Bagwell in them when they were still there. Those guys should have been put over. But the veterans, Hogan, Macho, Nash didn't want to put those guys over. But yeah, and the creation of two of the one of the coolest gimmicks ever. That was the Misfits in action, all led by humorists. They were all giving humorous names, including General Erection, General Erection. Chavo Guerrero was renamed Lieutenant Loco. Lashley was renamed Corporal Cajun. The Wall became Sergeant AWOL and turned face for the first time in his WCW career. And up until his release or him parting ways with WCW, had Van Hammer, who was Private Stash. So yeah, they had this military themed gimmick where they were the misfits. Their other term, nobody wanted them. Neither the New Blood. They weren't good enough to be part of the New Blood, so Russo fired them and several other wrestlers, including Jerry Flynn, and who sucks. He got released before this Awesome Angle was on the way. Jerry Flynn got released. And Vince Russo fired them, and later Norman Smiley and Ralphus, after they failed to defeat Terry Funk. But there were some guys who were young but weren't good enough to be in New Blood, and these guys, along with Dale Torwart, they weren't good enough to be in the New Blood. So yeah, and also it led to the rise of future Natural Born Thriller stars Sean Stasiak, Sean O'Hare, the late Sean O'Hare, Chuck Palumbo, and Mark Jindrak. Mark Jindrak, who Sean Stasiak during this period was doing the whole Perfect Sean thing. It was briefly up until he left feuding with the late Mr. Perfect. You also had the Awesome Sting versus Vampiro feud, which was good, but I got lots of problems with that. And multiple awesome stuff. Well, let's get to the pay-per-views. The first pay-per-view on this list was Spring Stampede 2000, one of my all-time favorites and one of WCW's best, and one of their best all-time wrestling cards. You had so many awesome matches. First off, you had tournaments. You had tournaments to crown the new champions with Russo and Bischoff. Returned to WCW. They stripped everyone of their titles and restarted and completely rebooted WCW. So they held tournaments. For each title, while completely retiring the television title, which I remember seeing the television title disappear around this time. Anyway, the show started off with Ric Flair in the total package, with Elizabeth defeating the Harris brothers and the Mamalukes in a World Tag Team Championship semi-final match. You also had, to this day I do not remember this, you also had Mancow with Al Roker, Al Roker Jr., Turd the bartender, and Freak defeating Jimmy Hart in a on the condition of Sting. Wait a minute. Defeating Jimmy Hart. To this day, I don't remember that. Then you got Scott Steiner defeating Wall. Pretty good, but short, big man match for United States Championship quarter-final match. Mike Awesome defeating Ernest the Cat Miller in a quarter-final match. Shane Douglas and Buff Bagwell defeating Harlem Heat 2000, Stevie Ray and Big T with Jay Biggs and Cash in one of Big T's final appearances. One of the best matches, Sting defeating Booker T. Sting defeating Booker T in a United States quarterfinal match. Vampiro in one of the other better matches. Vampiro defeating Kitman in a United States title quarterfinal match. Terry Funk defeating Norman Smiley in a hardcore match for the vacant WCW Hardcore Championship. Scott Steiner defeated Mike Awesome by submission to advance in the United States tournament. Sting defeated Vampiro by submission to once again advance. Chris Candido with Tammy Sitch, The Artist with Paisley, Juventud Shannon Moore with Shane Helms and Lash LaRue. Chris Candido defeated The Artist, Juventud Shannon Moore, and Lash LaRue and Crowbar with Daphne to win the cruiserweight during the Vacant Cruiserweight Championship in a 6-way match. The next match had Shane Douglas and Buff Bagwell with Vince Russo defeating Ric Flair in the total package to win the WCW Tag Team Championships. Then Scott Steiner defeated Sting by submission when Vampiro dragged Sting under the ring, dragged him in the ring, starting their feud. In the main event, Jeff Jarrett upset and defeated Diamond Dallas Page with Kimberly Page, and thus he was the chosen one by becoming the World Heavyweight Champion. When Kimberly Page turned on DDP by hitting Jeff Jarrett with a guitar. I remember as a child being furious when this happened. Right here. So yeah, what an awesome event. Yeah, Slamboree 2000. Card structure wise, not as good as the previous event, but it had one of the coolest main events of all time and a solid card in its own right. You started off with Chris Candido and Tammy Sytch defeating the Artist with Paisley for the Cruiserweight Championship in a match that resembled more of a United States TV title match than a Cruiserweight match. Terry Funk defeating Norman Smiley and Ralphus in a hilariously awesome action-packed hardcore match for the Hardcore Championship. Sean Stasiak defeating Kurt Hennig in a really good match. Scott Steiner defeating Captain Eugene Rection by submission in another good match for the United States Championship. Mike Awesome versus Kids Canyon in a no contest. That was another good match. The total package defeated Buff Bagwell by submission. In another good match, Shane Douglas defeated Flair in another good fight. Sting defeated Vampiro. Much to my annoyance, Sting got the better of Vampiro throughout this period. One thing I hated about this New Blood storyline was that Vampiro, who was rising in popularity, had it all quickly derailed when he turned heel for really no good reason other than that he was a young guy and Sting was an old guy. 9. Hulk Hogan defeated Billy Kitman with Tori Wilson, and yeah, let's talk about this infamous feud. It's infamous because this was considered the worst feud of wrestling in 2000. But I thought this was pretty good. The problem was it featured the wrong guy. Kitman was an awesome wrestler, but he wasn't big enough and didn't have the mic work to wrestle to wrestle and compete against a Hulk Hogan. Billy Kitman's role was meant for Chris Benoit, Eddie Guerrero, Malenko, Saturn, and Jericho, who all left. Booker T and Vampiro could have filled this spot too, but they were busy with other feuds. But I enjoyed this feud for what it was. It just should have been someone other than Kitman, but the promos and the segments between these guys was awesome. It just should have been someone other than Kitman and someone big enough, strong enough, and believable enough to actually beat Hogan. Yet Kitman coming straight from the Cruiserweight Tag Team and Mid-Card division and being going up against Hulk Hogan, the biggest and greatest wrestler of all time. People just didn't buy it. Then the awesome main event. Jeff Jarrett defeated David Arquette and Diamond Dallas Page in the Ready to Rumble cage match, the triple threat cage match from the Ready to Rumble movie for the WCW World Heavyweight Championship. This right here was one of the coolest matches ever. Mike Awesome tossed in one of the coolest spots and sickest spots, tossed Canyon off the cage. Canyon off the cage onto the hard ramp. This was awesome. You had the giant cage at the bottom, then the medium-sized cage, then the medium-sized cage at the top, then the top cage would have within the medium-sized cage would have the chairs, then the top which had the guitars. What a phenomenal match this was. And I keep forgetting this was a triple threat match because it was mostly Jeff Jarrett and DDP fighting each other, with David Arquette kept trying to interfere for DDP's half. Then later, David Arquette turned on DDP, thus revealing this whole thing was a ruse to get the belt back on, to get to help Jeff Jarrett to keep the belt on, to get the belt back on Jeff Jarrett, because David Arquette had controversially won the belt early this year. This was considered the most disgusting thing in WCW 2000. This is one of the main reasons I can't stand wrestling fans. Pro wrestling isn't real. Pro wrestling isn't real. A lot of people hated David Arquette winning. And then if you actually watch the entire storyline, which to this day people, especially WWE fans, do not, the whole thing was a ruse to get the belt back on Jeff Jarrett. Yeah, wrestling's not real. Wrestling is not real. Wrestling is not real. When it comes to storyline and wrestlers put over the belts, not the other way around. The belts are props, like Vince Russo said. I agree with him there. They're props, and people who hate that, boo-hoo. Boo-hoo, that's what it is. It's sports entertainment. You're not real. If anyone wants to come here and say, well, in Rocky IV, in Rocky beat Apollo Creed, that was a movie depicting boxing, which is real. Wrestling isn't real. But another awesome movie. Now we get the Great American Bash. This is probably, if I had to choose what was the weakest show during this period, it will probably be here. This show had a solid card and a lot of good matches, but other than Goldberg turning heel and joining the New Blood, nothing really exciting really happened on this show. The opener, you had Lieutenant Loco defeating Disco, retaining the Cruiserweight Championship. Chronic, Brian Adams, and Brian Clark defeating the Mamalukes, Big Vito, and Johnny the Bull in a pretty good #1 contenders match for the Tag Team Championships. One of the best matches. Mike Awesome defeated Diamond Dallas Page with Canyon turned on DDP. To my anger, and DDP would take some time off of WCW and return later on that year in the next era. G.I. Bro, Booker T's other gimmick. He defeated Shawn Spears in an awesome boot camp match. Shane Douglas defeated the Wall in a pretty good tables match. In one of the other good matches of the night, in my opinion, it didn't go. It ended too quickly. But Scott Steiner with Madeja and Shakira defeated Rick Steiner and Tank Abbott in a handicap asylum match. I love Tank Abbott, one of the most underutilized wrestlers during this period. They mostly had him feuding with Nick Carter's and Jobbers. Jobbers, but he should have been fighting the top stars and should have at once won the heavyweight title, because realistically, Tank Abbott was the toughest guy there. He could have beat anyone on that roster. But this Steiner Brothers feud was pretty good. Next was Hollywood Hulk Hogan defeating Billy Kitman. And I thought this match was better than their Slamboree match. He defeated Hollywood Hulk Hogan return instead of the cool New Blood character. We had Hollywood Hulk Hogan return, which was pretty cool as a kid, seeing the Hollywood character return as a heroic character. Ric Flair defeated David Flair with Ric Flair's family by ringside, and Vince Russo in the corner of David Flair in another good match. That's another memorable match. Vampiro defeated Sting in probably the most memorable match from this pay-per-view in the Human Torch match. One thing that's interesting was Sting being set on fire, but it wasn't Sting. I think it was Christopher Daniels as a wrestling, working as a stunt double for Sting. But anyway, remember the Sting being set on fire was one of the scariest things I've seen as a child. Then in the main event, it was Kevin Nash once again politicking his way into another main event. Probably Jeff Jarrett too, but Jeff Jarrett was actually talented. Jeff Jarrett defeated Kevin Nash when Goldberg turned on Kevin Nash by spearing him instead of Jeff Jarrett joining the New Blood.
He doesn't want to lose to Jeff Jarrett. He doesn't want to lose to 7 guys. It's about survival as much as it is about that belt. That's exactly what it is. It's twofold. It's maybe threefold. And here it comes. It's unbelievable that he can stand.
Now it's time for what is time for storyline wise. What was the final pay-per-view? What was the final pay-per-view in this series right here? And this was Bash at the Beach 2000. This was the final storyline in the New Blood Millionaires Club feud.
How many people does one man have to fight? Apparently 7.
This was a phenomenal pay-per-view. This pay-per-view gets a lot of flack for what happened in the Hollywood Hulk Hogan versus Jeff Jarrett main event main event. I remember seeing that as a kid and not knowing what the hell was going on. All I knew was my favorite thing about this show, this was Booker T's night. When Vince Russo came out and announced Booker T will be taking Hollywood Hulk Hogan's place and he will be fighting Jeff Jarrett for the World Heavyweight Championship.
Who's going to rip on it? It's going to be the cat.
Jeff Jarrett. It will be Hulk Hogan. It will be Hollywood Hulk Hogan defeating it will be Booker T wrestling Jeff Jarrett for the vacant World Heavyweight Championship. I'm gonna give my thoughts on this storyline, how I feel about it as an adult later in this review right here. But let's get to the card itself. But I thought this was another awesome card and pay-per-view from WCW in 2000. The first you had Logo Chavo Guerrero defeating Juventud to retain his cruiserweight championship. Big Vito defeated Norman Smiley and Ralphus in an awesome, hilarious three-way for the Hardcore to win the Hardcore. To retain his Hardcore championship. He had to retain it. He won it from Terry Funk on a Thunder or Nitro before this. Yeah, Daphne with Crowbar defeated Miss Hancock and David Flair in a wedding gown match, which was okay, but to this day I don't remember this. For Chronic, Brian Adams and Brian Clark defeating the Perfect Event, Sean Stasiak and Palumbo in an awesome tag team match for the World Tag Team title. Chris Kanyon defeated Booker T in another good match. Mike Awesome defeated Scott Steiner with Medeja by disqualification. Vampiro defeated the Demon in one of probably the most memorable match from this card, the Graveyard match, where they started in the graveyard, and the first person to go to the ring, make it to the ring won. Next was Shane Douglas defeating Buff Bagwell in a singles match, another favorite match of mine. Hollywood Hulk Hogan. Oh yes, now we get to the controversy. But before that, before I get to the controversial Hollywood Hulk Hogan versus Jeff Jarrett match, let's talk about the match that immediately went after that, before the actual main event, and that was Goldberg versus Kevin Nash with Scott Hall's contract on the line. For the first time ever, I always liked Goldberg more than Kevin Nash. I would put Kevin Nash as one of my top heels from WCW 2000, alongside Jeff Jarrett, Scott Steiner, and Triple H from WWE. But Kevin Nash kind of went back and forth. He started the year as a heel. Then during the Millionaires Club feud became a babyface. Then when this storyline ended, became a heel again. Then the Natural Born Thrillers turned on him, turning him face again for the remainder of WCW. But this is the only time I rooted for Kevin Nash over Goldberg, because I wanted Scott Hall back in WCW. But now as an adult, I kind of root for Goldberg more, even though I did want Scott Hall back, because I understand the storyline from Goldberg's point of view. Goldberg was like, I gave you guys a hero. And then later you try to cheer Kevin Nash and Scott Hall, the guys who kind of ended up destroying WCW. And Goldberg was kind of preserving and saving WCW even more by forcing Scott Hall out of WCW and trying to force Kevin Nash out of WCW later. Storylines like this will continue later in this review series, but right now let's get to the main event. Yeah, and Goldberg won when Scott Steiner turned on Kevin Nash, beginning his epic heel run, which dominated the remainder of WCW. Then you got the real main event. Vince Russo came out in the Hollywood Hulk Hogan match between him and Jeff Jarrett. Jeff Jarrett mysteriously laid down. As a kid, I didn't know what the hell was going on. Jeff Jarrett, and then Hulk Hogan cut a shoot promo that I didn't understand a word of. Me being younger, thinking wrestling was real and not knowing the business yet, did not know what the hell was going on when Hulk Hogan what he was saying about what he was saying about this is why the company's in the shape it's in. It's because of BS like this, and then Vince Russo came out and publicly fired Hulk Hogan. Now this is the part I didn't like. While I like him replacing him with someone else. What I didn't like was them firing Hollywood Hulk Hogan, and this was, in my opinion, one of WCW's biggest mistakes. Instead of firing Hollywood Hulk Hogan, they should have chose to suspend him and renegotiate his and have Hollywood Hulk Hogan renegotiate his contract for lesser money. If Hogan doesn't want to take it, then you fire him. Then you fire him, because by this point, Hollywood Hulk Hogan was the biggest star. He was still the biggest star on your roster. He was still the quote-unquote biggest star on your roster. You weren't going to beat Rock and Austin, WWE's two biggest stars at the time, with the roster you have now. The roster you have were better, in my opinion, were better than them. But Rock and Austin were much bigger draws. And better superstars. The WCW wrestlers, in my opinion, were better wrestlers and better characters, but they were bigger stars. Rock and Austin, and that's why they should have kept Hollywood Hulk Hogan. Who better to beat Rock and Austin than with the biggest guy, the first Rock, technically the first Rock, and technically the first Hogan. The first Stone Cold in Hollywood Hulk Hogan. So this was, in my opinion, one of the dumbest decisions. But I did like how Russo stood up to Hulk Hogan. Hulk Hogan was constantly politicking and holding people down, and that's one of the reasons wrestling that's one reason WCW is not here. Wrestling's in the shape it's in. Glad people like Hogan. I'm a huge Hulkamaniac, but glad people like him aren't in wrestling anymore. Then you got the main event. Then you got him as a kid, one of the coolest things ever, announcing Booker T, who at this point was still a mid-carder. He wasn't main event yet. They were grooming him for the main event, but he wasn't main event yet. And announcing Booker T, who had already wrestled that night against Kenyon, wrestling Jeff Jarrett for the vacant title, and Booker T upsetting and defeating Jeff Jarrett. As a kid, thought Jeff Jarrett would find a way to weasel his way out and leave with the championship. Not this time. Booker T made sure that didn't happen. That didn't happen by pinning him and thus winning the vacant world title and becoming the top babyface of WCW for the remainder of WCW. So yeah, this is the end of the New Blood and Millionaires Club storyline, even though the next pay-per-view is New Blood Rising. But by the time that pay-per-view happened, the New Blood and Millionaires Club storyline would be abolished in favor of a new storyline, and I'm gonna get new storyline. I'm gonna get to in the next video. So with that being said, you don't want to hear the rest of the music? Turn the video off right now.